Now, coming to our first session for the day, let's try to understand how cities can lead India's clean energy transition. If India aims to reach net zero emission by 2070, cities will need to be at the forefront of clean energy transition. For this, the growth of renewable energy and energy efficiency in urban areas needs to be recharted up to meet rising energy demand. Thus, cities must take the lead in local initiatives to meet national goals. However, cities face multiple barriers in participating in energy transition, and empowering cities to overcome barriers to their active involvement is essential. I would now like to invite the moderator for the session and the panelists to come on stage. My colleague Deepak Krishnan would be moderating for the session. And as they come on, please allow me to introduce the speakers in the session. Sumedha will also be one of the panelists. We also have with us Mr. Abhijit Ghodpade. Mr. Ghodpade is the Director of State Climate Action Cell within the Department of Energy and Climate Change, Government of Maharashtra. He has had diverse roles and responsibilities across Maharashtra's governmental landscape. He has been at the CM's office, the Maharashtra State Planning Board, and served as Additional Chief Land and Survey Officer, Manager Township Services, and Resident Deputy Collector. We also have with us Dr. Binu Francis, who is currently the Secretary of Thiruvananthapuram Municipal Corporation. He has earlier served as the Joint Director in Urban Affairs Department, Government of Kerala, having additional charge of Corporation Secretary of Thiruvananthapuram. He has played a critical role in running the first slum rehabilitation project under PPP in Kozhikode Corporation. I would like to call Mr. Ashim Roy. Ashim is the Program Lead, Energy Finance with Energy Program of WRI-India. Ashim comes with an extensive experience in banking and finance, working with leading commercial banks in India across multiple departments and business verticals. Finally, I would like to welcome Mr. Santosh Mazumdar, Director, Government Relations and Sustainability, Johnson's Control, India. Mr. Mazumdar is driving innovative business models for sustainability in the built environment, working closely with Ministries of Finance, DPIIT, PAR, and Housing and Urban Affairs. Our moderator for the session, Mr. Deepak Krishnan. Deepak is the Associate Director for WRI India's Energy Program and leads work on clean energy initiative, renewable energy, energy efficiency for different consumer categories. He also works on clean energy transition and water energy nexus. I would now request Deepak to take forward the session.
Sure. Thank you, Vagisha. Good morning to everyone present here, and thank you for taking time out to join us at ACE 2023. So Sumedha has very clearly laid out, what we are seeing across the 10 cities, and one could say that, in general, they encompass the trends that one would find, even in other cities going forward. Of course, there are specific observations, like in terms of, how come the smaller cities are outperforming the larger ones. Maybe that's a question we all want to explore. And a lot of what Sumedha said has also been echoed in the Urban 20 communique, which was issued prior to the G20 summit. Just to summarize some of the points that they have raised in the context of what we would be discussing today. That communique called for extensive research and development in energy efficiency and renewable energy for urban services, and among 8 critical actions, they have recommended regulations for new buildings to operate at net zero and for old buildings to be retrofitted for the same, maximizing use of renewable energy, incorporating circular economy and nature-based solutions in water, wastewater, solid waste management and construction. The communique also called for a framework for just and sustainable energy transitions and behavioral change at grassroots levels. So there have been a couple of interesting interventions in terms of behavior-based energy efficiency, which we have piloted. Sumedha, maybe at some point you could speak about it. And as far as just transitions at the urban level, maybe Dr. Francis, you could talk about the work that's happened in Thiruvananthapuram. Interestingly, the communique also called for specifically a loss and damage fund for cities for climate justice. I know this is going to be a huge topic at COP starting next week, but something on that line specific for urban areas was an interesting call for action in that report. And it also called for simple and standard taxonomies for cities to access climate verification finance, along with adequate monitoring and verification. And more importantly, and this touches upon some aspects of capacity building in terms of how ready are cities for climate finance. So even if, let's say, hypothetically, the magical pots of money, appear before us, how ready are cities to, take advantage of it and utilize them appropriately? So we'll try to cover as many of these as possible within our panel discussion. But maybe to start off with, I'll request the panelists to share their reflections on the summary of the draft report that Sumedha has shared, and what stood out from it for you in the context of your work. Maybe Dr. Francis, if I could start with you first.
Thank you. See, the theme of this deliberation is how the city can drive in neutralizing the carbon emissions. Of course, city can, since city play a major role in almost all activities. In India, almost 2.6% of the total land comes in urban area, and 31.6% of the total population is in the city, and 63% of the GDP is from city. Further, 75% of the total energy consumption is happening in city, and around 72% of this waste is generated in city. Further, almost our transition, around 68 transition, maybe it's mobility or some other kind of transition happening in city. That is the vibrant nature of the city. So further, 75% of the emission is also happening in city. So the city can only to a certain level address the issue of carbon emission. But unfortunately, that is in the mandate of the city. See, we have 19 items as per the constitution, the 12th schedule. We have so many issues, this agenda is there. Maybe urban housing, urban forestry, urban transport, water supply, even electricity is not there, housing is there. But this is a new term or new item which has been recently developed, say climate change or carbon emission, that is not in the mandate of the city. But majority of the items are dealt by the city corporations. One thing. The second thing is, out of this Indian agenda of sustainable development, the clear mandate is on the urban local body, around 10 to 11 subjects we have. So city can play a major role. So the topic is very relevant. I think there's 10 or 11 cities has been already surveyed, preliminary findings there. Of course, I am also echoing with the findings of the survey. City can play a major role. Thank you.
First of all, congratulations. I think this is a great initiative. Several high points there in the report. I don't think I've ever seen anything like a score for all the 10 cities and how cities fare. And I was not surprised that the city I come from, Bangalore, was not among the top of them. But great. I think several high points there. I think the whole aspect of the governance piece of it, that lack of a structured approach, by cities, getting drifted away by a certain linear approach, saying that this would contribute. I think great findings there. I think there's a lot more to take, and I can't wait to see the final version of that report. It also does touch upon, I think it was in Surat, that there were some interesting initiatives that were taken related to energy audits. I think these are really nice outcomes from this research. I mean, I think this work is basically putting out some great practices from each cities. Having said that, there are a couple of things which I think may be included. One is the energy performance index. Let's say, for example, if I think Dr. Francis mentioned here about 75% of the energy is consumed in cities, and interestingly, in cities, 60% of the energy is actually consumed by buildings. Now, the place where we spend most of our times, and the energy performance index of buildings is something I think would be really, really helpful. But the challenge there is, a qualitative measurement would not help. I think one of the one of the difficult challenges we live in is that we can only make qualitative assessments. I think way forward, maybe we could do something more about it. These are the few observations I had on the report. But otherwise, I think it's a great beginning.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Sundar. Mr. Ghorpade?
Thank you, Deepak. Sumedha, that was a very detailed and wonderful presentation. And thank you, WRI, for inviting me for this panel discussion. We are focusing on cities because cities matter. All said and done, cities do matter. And it is expected by the year 2050, almost two-thirds of the world population will be residing in cities. And as Francis mentioned, cities consume almost 75% of the electricity and emit 70% of greenhouse gases. So that is the importance of cities. And while cities are at the center of climate change, they ought to be at the forefront of climate action. And that's the vehicle through which policies are implemented. The National Action Plan for Climate Change, be the State Action Plan on Climate Change. We need vehicle to implement the climate action plan at a grassroots. And that is where the grassroots governance happens. And with over 40% of people in India residing in cities, and the pace of the acceleration of urbanization growing very fast, we ought to focus on cities, and rightly so. So I think focusing on the various aspects of energy transition in cities is the right strategic thing to do in order to accelerate implementation of the national as well as the state action plans.
Thank you, Mr. Ghorpade. Ashim, if I could just turn to you.
Yeah. The report has touched upon several aspects of the transitions within the city. But one important factor is how to mobilize finance and whether the existing financial mechanisms are adequate enough to cater to the humongous financial requirements the cities have embarked on these transition plans. Coming into a couple of new things which has come up in the reports is to build up capacities of these institutions at their cities level and to try new financial innovative mechanism. So because with the scale of financing that is required, in fact, the World Bank reports has been, quoting it to be somewhere around $814 billion of investment the cities will require till 2036, almost 15 years. But with this kind of humongous requirement, it is not possible for one single entity, be it a private or a public financing, to cater to this requirement, including the MDB's concern. So it require more innovation and blended financing structure, where the public will, in a structured in a manner that will attract private financing to come in. And the reports has also touched upon several aspects of de-risking investments and de-risking the concern of the cities, and also for cities to really gear up. The report has highlighted the 72 to 73% of these funds, the existing funding structures of cities, are coming from the public sources, which are basically transfers from the national and the central and the state government. And almost 13% of the financing structure, existing financing structure of the cities, are debt financing. And within debt financing, you'll find 8% is basically a loan from HUDCO. So primarily, if the cities has to mobilize more amount of private financing to come in, they would require, innovation mechanism, and this financing should also come in at a long-term, low-cost structure so that it has become more affordable. So these are a couple of highlights. I would also deliberate on some more facts within the reports, and as well as some innovative mechanism that city can utilize for financing this kind of funding. Thanks.
Thank you, Ashim. Sumedha, if it is okay, I'll come back to you after one round of questions. So, Dr. Francis, coming back to you, you mentioned that there are these 19 different agendas that have been, traditionally part of a city's task, but it's a changing world that we live in. And, whether that is mandated or not, maybe climate change is the 20th thing that needs to be added to the list. But in this context, with climate change already upon us, multiple challenges in terms of natural disasters and growing pressures from various quarters, what are some of the challenges that you are facing? Yes, there were some that Sumedha mentioned, but are there things that you would add on to those? Some things which have not been covered, or is there some qualification or nuance that you would want to add to the challenges that Sumedha presented in her slides?
See the challenges. Okay. See, there are multiple stakeholders, multiple departments. See, in Kerala, that's I are representing. Representing Trivandrum City Corporation. The departments concerned the police, revenue, then of course local government administration. These are the major three government departments. So the inter-department coordination is one of the issue. See, recently we have another department, climate change or environment department is also there. They are coordinating all these activities as a single node point. The second thing is, as far as city is concerned, finance is one of the issue, and the manpower, the technical quality of our people. So we have different departments, maybe engineering or some other domain that we have. But this is a new item which has come into the domain of the city administration. Technical now is an issue. Again, coming to Kerala, we have a number of initiatives. See, the state has already declared that the Kerala state will be carbon neutral by 2050. And city corporation, the last budget has declared by 2040, the city of Trivandrum Corporation will be carbon neutral. And we have so many initiatives, but there are so many challenges like this. Since in Kerala, many of the cities are on the coastal sides, we have so many issues due to the presence of the sea erosions and such other things that's happening. Recently, we have a number of issues like 2018 we have flood, 2007 19 floods, and recently to 2023 we have in Trivandrum city we have floods. So these are so many issues that's we have no comprehensive items to address this issue. To my understanding, as far as the city is concerned, spatial planning is very important for the future, since we are regulating almost all kind of construction activities. Say 40 to 50% of the emissions are due to carbon, due to construction activities. But city corporation is regulating all these kind of activities. One thing which needs some kind of intervention. And second is by vehicle movements, which we can also manage. City can of course play an important role. The third is from industry. In Kerala, we have that kind of high investment industry is not there. Only in certain parts in Kochi we have. So these are the major areas from where this carbon or this emission is happening. So in all these three sectors, city has a great role to regulate all these things, all these activities. So these are the some challenges that we are facing now.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you very much. Maybe I'll come to you, Mr. Ghorpade, because Dr. Francis spoke about, the climate change department in Kerala. So you are playing a similar role in Maharashtra, and possibly your role also involves coordinating with multiple city governments also as part of your duties. Could you elaborate on the vision of the state government and, concerning climate action? And what are the energy-related initiatives that you are carrying out in implementing this vision?
Sure, Deepak. I think the fact which all of us sitting here would appreciate that climate change is the greatest challenge faced by mankind in the 21st century. We are in fact living in the world of planetary emergency. And though the scale of the challenge is global, the actions ought to be local. And that's why we are talking about cities as the vehicle of implementing climate action. Maharashtra is the most industrialized state in the country. It is the largest subnational economy of the size of 437 billion US dollars, contributing the highest to the national GDP at 14%, the highest to the national industrial production at 15%, and the highest to national exports in terms of value at 20%. So it's truly an engine of India's economic growth. Now, we aim at attaining $1 trillion economy by the year 2028. Now, here the Prime Minister has announced the goal for India to attain net zero by 2070. Now, how do we reconcile the two? That's the real challenge. And undoubtedly, the path lies in attaining sustainable development, which calls for massive energy transition. And that's the growth trajectory which is reflected in the newly formed state action plan on climate change, which has been prepared recently. And the state, in order to implement the state action plan on climate change, has also formulated the state climate action cell, which I head. We also plan to implement the district climate action plans, and we also aim at formulating the city climate action plans in the days to come. So I believe that Maharashtra, being the most developed state in the country, it's upon us to show the way to lead this transition towards green economy.
Sure, thank you. Mr. Mazumdar, coming to you, now the role of government, kind of we have, we are all aware and, the importance of, in terms of setting the rules and regulations, giving the policy context, but the private sector too has a significantly important role to play, bringing in, technologies, as Ashim mentioned, finance to come in. What do you think is going to be the role of private sector going forward? What, in your view, does the future look like for cities? If we manage to implement energy transitions, I mean, how do you see this energy transition going? With the involvement of private sector.
Thanks, Deepak. And I just want to leave this unquestionably clear that there is no decarbonizing cities without decarbonizing buildings. I think this has to be very, very well understood. Now, as a private player, when we, let's say, approach a building owner with, his basically question, do you really want to decarbonize this building? I think there are two responses we get. One is, does it make business sense? Or is there a regulation? Well, I think the regulation piece of it, we can't complain much. I think there has been engagement. There are, like Sumedha outlined in her talk, there are certain policies. Some cities are doing a bit of it every here and there. Clearly, energy efficiency is neglected. And the example that I give here is that you'll have to first address the leaky tank before pouring water into it, right? So regulations are there, but I think the biggest challenge we have is implementation of these regulations, enforcement of this. You can't deal that with a firm hand as always, but it has to be some sort of an enablement for building owners. The second piece of it, does it make business sense? I think that's a relatively easy question to answer. No, and that is when, let's say, we conduct an energy audit. I mean, typically, I'm just quoting a number here from our business. Roughly, if you take a commercial building, we have always seen that there is approximately 30 to 50% of energy savings that can be done in any building that we have audited. Now, that is significant energy savings. It just means that he's paying 30%, 50% lesser in electricity costs. Now, I think now to do this, to make this, to realize this, there are two other challenges, right? There is adoption of technologies, and then there is financing. And in many cases, we come back and say we can finance this, upgrades ourselves. But then one of the challenges we face there is enforcement of contracts. Now, I think the biggest impediment for expanding our investments is that we could come up with various measurement and verification protocols, but then we need to have a better understanding of how these contracts will work, how these business models will work. I don't think we have got enough case studies. And every time we approach a government, the government says, let's do a pilot. I mean, we don't mind doing a pilot, but we can't do 29 pilots, right? So, it's just that we need to address these concerns. But the third piece of it is that is adoption of technologies is concerned. I think we are way, way, way behind. I'll give you an example. Some of the great hotels and hospitals here in this place still use boilers for heating water. Can you believe this? I mean, they have an air conditioning system where they reject heat, and they have boilers where they get heat and burn it out. I mean, the simple solution there is go and use a heat pump. You're getting 4 to 5 times higher energy efficiency. I mean, this is very, very simple to be utilized in, let's say, a hotel or a hospital where you have demand for cooling as well as for heating. So the adoption of technologies, in my opinion, is a major concern. And to address all these challenges that I mentioned, I think the good thing is that there are solutions, there are examples here. And I go back to this, what cannot be measured really cannot be improved. I think the point, Sumedha, that you're making in your report is we are only making qualitative analysis. I'll just take another minute, Deepak. We are only making qualitative analysis. I mean, if you look at the industrial park rating system, not to criticize, not to critique that, but that's all qualitative. I mean, you would send a questionnaire and say, are you doing this? Are you doing this? I mean, we really don't know, right? And for that matter, any other assessments we are doing, it's all quantitative. I think the simple solution to that is it will happen. 10 years down the line, this is not where we are. This is not where we will be. So we will have digitized buildings. We will have data coming out of buildings without human intervention. For example, how much is the energy consumed in a building per square foot area? How much is the energy consumed for a building per occupant? These are data that can be directly, posted onto a dashboard somewhere, like the way we have done smart cities. We are measuring, rather we are putting CCTV cameras, we are having advanced video analytics. I think there is a future where we are going to create sustainability command and control centers, either it be it under the smart cities, be it under municipal governments, wherever it is. I think it's important to gather data from these buildings and monitor this data consumption and therefore take data-backed policy decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mazumdar. Ashim, coming to you. So we have seen the importance of data, technology, policies, regulation. Now, finance, you touched upon the need for blended financing, private sector to also come in. Recently, there was this report where KfW is in talks with Mohua to finance India's the e-bus procurement that is planned. But that's where I see a challenge. For instance, all the money is going to the central government, but today we're talking about cities, which is two levels down at centralization scale. So how do you think financial institutions, particularly the ones like the World Banks and KfWs of the world, how do they move beyond that central government level, start engaging with states and cities to help these agencies speed up the energy transition?
Yeah. Thanks, Deepak, for setting the tone. So there are a couple of few facts which we have to establish before we embark on this particular aspects of financing. So most of the projects, or I'm seeing it in the perspective financing per se. So most of the projects which are primarily with respect to the cities are concerned, they are long-term projects, and where the revenue streams, the cash inflows are not very clearly well defined. So there will be certain portions which are coming from the taxes and revenue that is going to be generated, and also the service charges, but these are not well defined and structured. So it's very important first to establish that this is the projects, this is the long term time horizons on the tenure of the projects is concerned, and this is a structure of financing that we as a cities will require. So part of it will be either in the form of a grants, part of it will be in the form of equity, which are basically of a long-term horizons, and part of it will be, either a debt portion of financing that would be required from various sources, either it may be from the commercial and private sources, or will be also from the public financial institutions. There will be another components which are basically the multilateral development bonds, banks concessional line of funding that will also plays a very important factor. So it's very important first for cities to identify a series of projects, and these are projects which has to be structured within a bankable structures, and then build up some kind of a financing plan for them to mobilize, and that way state entities have a very important role to play. We can take a couple of examples. For example, when rooftop solar was not gaining a lot of tractions, and financial institutions were not coming in. So World Bank, give a concession, a line of funding to State Bank of India under the Suprava program. And it is not only the scale of finance of somewhere around 648 million dollars of bank financing that has happened. It was also financing coupled with technical assistance, lot of deliberation, stakeholders engagements, and also to build up capacities of the government entities, the discoms, and also various other entities who are involved within the city plans to take rooftop solar to the next horizon. So initially it was for the CNA segments, which were primarily one of the major demands, but they have also included the residential sector. Another example is, some kind of a blended financing that cities have utilized was in the state of Tamil Nadu. What they have done, most of the cities, in fact, they don't have the ability to, really understand what can be a bankable projects, or what kind of a credit rating assessments are concerned, how to undertake a credit rating in terms of, what are the parameters, and as well as, a lot of derivations are required for that. So what they have done, they have combined together as an entity. They've come and pooled in funds. So the pooled financing facilities is still there. It's been utilized for the water and sanitation. It can be used for clean energy transitions also. So when I say this, we require a platform at a city's level where this blending mechanism can work out. So there will be the state institutions who will say that, okay, fine, I'm giving you a seed money of 100 crores to start as this particular projects which we have in plan. And the MDPs can come in and they said, okay, fine, I not only provide a concessional line of funding, I also give a credit risks enhancement guarantee. And thereby the private sector can also come in and check in and say, okay, fine, once these de-risking mechanisms are in place, there's a concessional lines, there is some kind of subvention built into that, that I'm also been ready to participate in this particular programs. So overall, we need to really understand that for this mechanism to work out, cities also need to leverage and build upon their existing structures they have. We have seen it in the case of Indore, where they have taken up a queue. They've seen that there is a green bond mechanism working in, and they have actually been able to mobilize a certain portion of money that it for the water pumping side. It can be actually mobilized for the other sources also. We have seen carbon offset mechanism, though it is not at that time when they have done it, there was no carbon trading markets which is which plan out to be developed, of course, but that mechanism was not done. They have done it under the CDM mechanisms and been able to mobilize that level of scale of some source of financing that could happen. So cities at this particular moment really need to prioritize where they wants to have the money from. Either we, in fact, cities also very well know it cannot be the transfers of 72% which are happening either through the smart city program or the Amrit. We need to have other financing sources to come in, either private or from the DFIs to come in. For that, they need to gear up and start building up their capacity and then mobilizing more financing. Thanks.
Thank you, Ashim. Sumedha, you have heard the reflections of the panelists on the presentation that you made, and also a few additional points that they covered. But just to go back to the presentation, were there findings that came out during the research that surprised you? And if you have any reflections on what all the panelists have shared so far.
I completely agree with Santosh here on the lack of data. But I would say the findings in terms of what was surprising was the amount of data now available as a part of the Climate Cities Assessment Framework. It's a step in the right direction in the sense that at least there's a dashboard which has been created which can help you understand where cities are. It can help you track progress. Of course, it's not perfect, but it's a starting point driven largely by MOHUA's efforts at building capacity of cities to address climate risks. So that is definitely to your refrain on the lack of data. data. And I would say, from the point of view of the research that we conducted, what stood out are a few things for me, and I'll pick out a few examples of that, like five of these that I have in mind. One is and something which we also covered in the case studies, is the attention that is now being given to waste to energy projects. It's a technology which has been around for really long, but what is interesting is how different cities are tapping into using the products of treating waste in different manners. So Indore is an example where they're using it for powering their buses. Pune is also doing the same thing, and I believe so is Nagpur, as per the research that we conducted. So quite an interesting way of looking at biogas generated, compressing it in a form that it can be used for several other sectors as well. At the same time, there are, of course, enablers that have come in from the government of India. There are now guidelines on waste to energy projects that the government of India has just recently released, and there is a $2 billion rupee investment opportunity in just waste to energy. So I think that was quite interesting. The second aspect, which is more of a critique as well, like probably a criticism, is the fact that despite energy efficient municipal services being around for such a long time, not many are still tapping into that. So at least the 10 cities that we studied, only Pune, Surat, and Pune and Surat stood out in terms of how they are looking at managing energy demand from the municipal operations and what kind of energy savings can happen because of energy efficiency interventions. And several programs at the national level have been done in the last 2 decades. There have been a lot of technical assistance, development assistance being given for energy efficiency guidelines, toolkits, resources. So everything is there, but still we don't see much action on the energy efficient municipal operations. And the same goes with its integration with renewable energy. So now that you have renewable energy at lower cost, you could use it effectively for powering municipal operations. Some cities are doing it. Some cities are doing it on a side-by-side basis, that if they have the land, then they do it. Otherwise, they don't plan for it effectively. So that was the second thing that stood out for me. The third thing, most interestingly, is while we did give example of Indore as a shining example of the fact that it has been able to use some of the bio-CNG, biogas generated from the WTE plants, something which we would like to share with this audience is also the fact that because they are in this contract with the private producer, private operator of the plant, to use the CNG, to use this natural gas. I mean, they have they have bucketed their the products into different categories. So some of it is being used for organic manure that is being sold in the market. Some of it is for public transport, and some of it is for just selling it back into retail in the form of CNG. But at the same time, we have heard that this has led to a deprioritization of electric vehicles for them, because they're seeing this as an energy security thing, that my waste is generating this biogas, I'm using it for my buses. Do I need to invest in electric buses because I have this contract which is long term? So that was quite an interesting example from Indore. The fourth thing is with respect to something which Ashim mentioned regarding financing and the lack of financing. I think, and this is not something unique to energy transition alone, but the fact that cities still don't understand how to generate revenue from some of these initiatives is definitely a big gap that we need to address. So it's not always that you will get a grant or you will get financing from outside to support infrastructure projects in cities. But Indore sort of stood out as a model in the way that they were able to identify certain revenue streams from whatever they were doing. So whether it's the carbon market or the green bonds, they were able to find ways to capitalize on this aspect of generating revenue from clean energy transition actions. And the last point is with respect to the fact that cities are not just residential buildings and commercial buildings. There are also industrial buildings. There are several industries located in many cities in India, and they are, of course, contributing to declining air quality. But there is a very important angle of jobs and employment associated with this. So in a city, when we look at these different sectors, the approach to energy transition will be quite different for an industrialized city versus a non-industrialized city. So this kind of how do we really pilot approaches which work for certain cases and not other cases? So I think those are also larger questions for deliberation at the national level.
Thanks, Sumedha. And very interesting point about Indore actually the bringing to life the energy basket concept that we speak of. Now, just moving on to the next segment where we'll try to look ahead and see what is the way forward before I turn it over to the audience for questions. Dr. Francis, you have spoken about the challenges that the city faces. But now, given that it's not just about implementing these energy projects and making buildings energy efficient or powered by clean energy, there is also the social justice angle, especially when it comes to cooling. How do we ensure that thermal comfort reaches even the communities which do not have the necessary financial means to adopt appliance-led solutions. So, how do you think? What would be your top priorities going forward, considering these challenges also which are there? It's no longer just about implementing clean energy projects, but you also need to capture in ensure a just transition that lifts all segments of the society along.
I'll first comment on this, Mr. Santosh ji talk about the construction sector. See, the construction sector is regulated by the local bodies. We have this green building code, which is advisory in nature. But in all states, we have building bylaws, building rules. That is regulating the construction activities. We have a national building code, of course, which is also sometimes it may be, if there is any condition, this building rules will prevail. It's to a certain extent, is a regulatory nature. So this will not promote the kind of construction that we have. See, in Kerala, we have a 2019 a new building code which encompasses almost all the features of green building. I will say three clear provisions regarding this. One is in the earlier building rules, that is in 1919, we have provision for solar energy only. That's a single panel is sufficient. But now 50% of this top roof should be this solar, this panel should be there, one thing. 50% compulsory. The second thing is, if the plot size is 10 cents, there should be 10 plants. If it is more than that size, then the proportional rate should be there. The third thing is, as far as the building line or the building, the DGB scheme is concerned, maximum ventilation, the natural ventilation, natural air, natural light should be there. It's a clear provision. Again, this catching the rainwater. There should be clear provision. What is the total area of the building? Then this will be the capacity of the tank to collect the rain. Again, this is a provision in the building rules. Again, there is an interesting provision from the part of the government that we are providing 10% reduction in property tax if a building is certified as green building by the EMC, Energy Management Center. So there are certain parameters. Yes, they will check. The builder should apply for the same. Then the EMC will verify whether all these patents are compliant. Then they will certify. There are three kinds of certification. If it is a Paka A grade, then we will provide 10% this exemption. See, we have Lulu Mall in Trivandrum, which is around 2 lakhs meter square area, and they have already claimed for this exemption. Our property tax is around 4.8 CR per year. So we have to provide 44 lakhs as an incentive to the building owners. So these things are happening in Kerala. One thing. The second thing is some other initiatives from the part of Trivandrum City Corporation is we have 400 vehicles run by the RTC within the city area. Out of this, 25% is now it is e-buses, and we have provided around 121 buses, e-buses under smart city mission. See, we have 720 government buildings in my corporation area, big buildings of feasibility, of nature of feasibility. Out of this, 600 has been already converted into solar. We have fixed solar on all these vehicles. Again, come to, we have 8% green cover. Now our proposal is to enhance the same to 12% green cover within a couple of by 2040. Again, coming to, we have 1.20 street lights, and we have already an MOU with an international agency to convert all these street lights into LED. The process is going on. Within a couple of 6 months, we can convert all these incandescent light into LED. So these are certain this initiative from the part of the city corporation to address the issue of carbon emission. By 2040, we can achieve the same. So these are some of the initiatives.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Francis. Mr. Ghorpade, coming to you. So you spoke about the city climate action plans also that have been developed in Maharashtra. What is going to be the implementation path forward from the energy side of things? Any key pointers that you can walk us through?
Yeah, Deepak, before I get into what the cities are doing and what we are doing, let me briefly touch upon what are the major policies which we plan to implement, basically through cities. Now, I mentioned about the need for a massive transition from grey economy to green economy. I think three sectors are crucial in this regard: industries, transportation, and buildings, as we discussed. Now, take the example of my state, Maharashtra. Currently, almost 72% of our energy comes from burning fossil fuels, particularly coal, and nearly 5% comes from renewables. Now, we want to change that, and the plan maps how to do that. Now, we plan to enhance the renewables to 18% by the year 2030 and reduce the dependence on fossil fuels to 54% to begin with. Now, as you are aware, Maharashtra launched its electrical vehicle policy. You mentioned about electrical buses in 2021. And we plan to promote EV very strategically, basically in the fields of public transport, tempos, three-wheelers. Now it's mandatory for all the government officers to buy electrical vehicles. We are doing it very systematically. We are aware that there's a need for massive charging infrastructure in order to promote EVs, and the policy enables setting up charging stations in cooperative housing societies, petrol pumps, railway stations, ST stands, public parkings. Now it's mandatory to have 20% of public parking allotted, restricted strictly for electrical vehicles. We are also promoting BRTS. Now you took the example of Pune. In Pune we have BRTS, but cities like Nagpur or Mumbai also hold tremendous potential for BRTS. That would make planning more inclusive and participatory and more democratic thereby. We have also introduced the policy of integrated townships and integrated industrial areas, wherein 60% of area will be reserved for manufacturing and 40% for social amenities, including residential amenities, so that people don't have to commute long distances. That would really mitigate emissions, so that they can walk to work or cycle to work. And then we mentioned about, Francis mentioned about retrofitting. That is a key area. Now, so far as our state is concerned, we have a policy which makes it mandatory for all the public buildings to go green, to abide by the green code. But we need to promote retrofitting and weathering of the existing buildings so as to make them more energy efficient. Now, coming to cities, we are focusing, as you are aware, that we are almost 45% of the state's population currently resides in cities, and we are the third most urbanized state in the country. Now, in the years 2026, it is projected that Maharashtra would be the most urbanized state in the country. So we are focusing on the cities, and city plans are being made. And I must mention here that with the support of WRI-India, we have formulated city climate action plans for 4 cities: Mumbai, Nasik, Chhatrapati Sambhajinagar, that is erstwhile Aurangabad, and Sholapur. Now the Mumbai City Action Plan is already in place. It is in public domain. And for the rest of the three cities, they're at the draft stage and they will be published soon. Uh, we have also launched accelerating climate action in the cities of Maharashtra with the support of WRI. And WRI is also planning for individual sectors, particularly energy, transport, habitat, and urban development. All this, we are focusing on 43 major cities, which are called Amrut cities because they are covered in the Amrut scheme. They are all of the population size above 1 lakh per city. And almost 76% of people in the urban areas of the state reside in these Amrut cities. So that is the strategy. Uh, with the support of C40, Climate Leadership, City Climate Leadership Group, we have recently launched HERB, that is Health Efficient Retrofitted Buildings. That's the tool. And in order to build capacities of the city administrators, we have been holding workshops in this regard. And very soon, we also plan to launch the decarbonization strategy, especially for energy and building sector. On the 1st of December, we are convening all the ULBs, the 43 municipal corporations and councils, to build their capacities and to sensitize them about the zero carbon map. And these 43 cities are a part of the race to zero. So they are all committed to attain net zero by 2050. So we believe that it has to be a collaborative enterprise between the policymakers, experts such as you, and the city administrators.
Thank you. Mr. Mazumdar, coming over to you, if you were to draw up a wish list of 3 top priorities for private sector investments in the clean energy space, what would they be? And you spoke about, contract enforcement and clarity on, how the governments would engage. But are there any other things that you would like to add to that?
Clearly, I think the first and foremost driver for investment has always been a thriving economy. Favorable policies, high increasing consumption patterns. I think these are clearly favorable drivers for us. The company that I work for, we have invested, in a new manufacturing facility, added more than 3,000 people in just 1 year, and that is in Maharashtra. Now that clearly signifies how much India holds as a potential for us. Now, in terms of we are all this work that we are doing in terms of policies, in terms of private consumption, I think is clearly giving us that I don't know, maybe a 20% or 25% growth. But if you're really looking at a growth which is as anticipated in most of the reports, for example, in 2037, I think on a 2017 base, there's going to be 11 times increased consumption in cooling capacity, right? I think if we are to just realize this, I think there are a couple of things. One, I think the policies, whenever we have discussions with policymakers, I think this has been brilliant. Now, we've always seen a meeting of minds. We've always seen understanding of where we are coming from. So there's always that language that gets, inserted. Now, I think there are a couple of points. Now, one is, better finance options, okay, and enforcement of contracts that I mentioned. A. B, capacity building. I think that's one of the significant directions private companies would look for. When let's say a private company comes and states a certain data or presents a certain data that this is certain green or whatever it is not, I think the authorities will need to have some sort of a capacity building within themselves, to ascertain the claims that are made and basically decide based on that. I think this is a significant, driver for investments. That will bring in, stability. That will bring in decisiveness in the decisions that we are going to make. So capacity building is a third, and the third one is. Being open to technologies that are not just followed in Western countries, but then ahead of what the Western countries are doing. I can tell you this. Johnson Controls, exports 90% of its R&D services to the globe from here in India, that is in Pune, Maharashtra. I think there is absolutely no dearth of talent in developing new technologies. I think pilots are a great example. Cooling as a service is a great example. District cooling is a great example. There have been some impediments, many impediments on adopting newer technologies. For example, heat pumps, and I was giving an example of heat pumps. It's the still feeling we have. Most the feeling we have is heat pumps is used for heating. It is required in colder countries and all that. But if you look at what Europe has done, Europe has basically given heat pumps as the status of renewable energy. Now, promoting of certain technologies and not relying just upon solar PV as example. These are three things, Deepak, that comes to my mind in terms of what could really increase our investments. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Santosh. Ashim, over to you. In terms of financing, what do you think are some new developments in terms of financing structures that we can expect, which can enable cities to access finance better? So if Sumedha also already spoke about monetizing their existing clean energy interventions, so are there things like that which we could build on?
So actually, now as we know that transition is imminent and we need to take into this task of going into this transition. So it's very important now to prepare ourselves for a transition plan. So there has been a discussion. In fact, Niti Aayog has been now very closely working with the states to build up their own transition plan. Now, what this transition plan will entail, it will have sectoral pathways, and sectoral pathways may include industry, building, transport, and key sectors which are very critical in terms of these overall transitions is concerned. So for that, there will be several data and data related aspects. Their energy consumptions and demand will also be evaluated and will also be monitored, and then build up that what kind of transition we foresee for this kind of particular sector to happen, whether there is any room for the kind of saving which Santosh ji has mentioned about how we can use within the existing structures, or how we can make some kind of changes within the technology spare or within the retrofittings. For example, there has been a lot of focus on rooftop solar, and rooftop solars have certain level of capital expenditure, but certain governments mechanism have really think about some kind of innovations to come in by using the resco model to convert those the government buildings into to implement rooftop solar in those buildings, and at least in a way they have bypassed the capital expenditure requirement for this kind of investment to happen. So we can also look into some kind of third party structure within the transition plan where we can mobilize additional, we can save a certain amount of revenue or expenditure, as well as we can mobilize new resources. The second action plan is basically to create a platform either at the state level or at a cities level where multiple stakeholders can come in and participate, and they can co-develop a certain kind of financing structures for the requirement of the cities. So it can be either bundling or using a blended structures. It can be some kind of state support in terms of making these investments affordable, in terms of decrease in terms of looking at the tenure of the facilities, how they can, when the MDBs can also come in and look into that, some kind of de-risking mechanisms and guarantees can be built into the structures. So, and also one more important factor is basically aggregations of different projects at a single platform for for financing institutions to come in and participate. They also require some kind of aggregation rather than looking at individual one-to-one projects. The third part is to build up capacities of institution to really understand how the financial institutions looked into financing of projects, or how different actors are looking at. So for that need to happen, and the government of India is also supporting the cities in terms of doing their own credit rating. Cities also need to understand that how they can mobilize additional capacities. So for that, The city institutions will also require a lot of handholding supports in order to understand the credit. So, for example, the carbon offset mechanisms. Most of the cities will not have the kind of, the ability to really understand how, these carbon accounting works out for different sectors, and how they can, use and leverage the existing institutional mechanism to mobilize more of funding. So for that, they require more supports. So capacity building support is another important factor which the cities needs in order to mobilize additional funding is concerned. And with new developments happening in this sector, I'm seeing that there is a lot of ray of hope, emerging within the mechanism, that this institutions are actually getting mainstream. The objective is getting to, mainstream this kind of financial institutions in the city spares to come in. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Ashim. Sumedha, you spoke earlier about how municipal energy efficiency services could be tapped more. The lack of awareness is one of the major factors. So, are there other issues like that, in your opinion, which cities are unaware of? What are some other low-hanging fruits that they could look at? And we really haven't managed to get to the behavioral aspect. So, are there things which the cities and private sector could work together to build on in the clean energy transition?
Sure, thanks, Deepak. So I think kind of echoing Dr. Binu Francis's comments regarding how everything is new for the cities, and it's becoming a catch up for them, in the sense that the technologies and the institutions and the policies are evolving way faster than us having the ability to address some of the legacy issues which exist in cities. I mean, our urban planners, our town planners are still catching up with the new requirements. Climate change is still considered a new subject despite it being in the public discourse for such a long time. And here we add something on the lines of integration of more and more renewables in the grid, the fact that increasingly more climate risks are going to be faced by cities when they have to also at the same time balance the needs of the most vulnerable communities. So cities are looking for a very interesting time ahead. So I mean, rather to complicate in terms of adding more emerging issues, what are some of the untapped opportunities? You already talked about one of them, which is fairly straightforward, that is procurement of renewable energy for municipal operations. Now that with the green energy open access regulations, the kind of amendments that have been made in 2022, there's a larger opportunity for even smaller consumers to access green power through the grid. I do want to take a moment and think about some of the things that cities are unprepared for, and gradually we see some developments happening. And I would say with the growing incidences of heat waves and heat stress, I think Santosh already pointed out about the requirement for cooling, and I think cities are just not prepared for it in terms of how to handle very high heat conditions, whether it's through mitigation of heat or through adapting to heat. Some examples of heat action plans have come out, but they are they are not complete. They don't talk about several issues which need to be at the forefront in managing heat effectively. So I feel in terms of a climate impact that we have to consider, heat stress would be one of them. I do see the fact that with the technology disruptions that we spoke about, the concept of sector coupling, wherein our decarbonization of the electricity sector is happening fairly fast, it's happening at a fast pace. But at the same time, it being able to decarbonize our buildings is a question mark. We are still pretty behind when it comes to electrifying end uses. And now we are hearing conversations regarding, I mean, electric cooking. So could that be the next disruptor? That we'll have more and more electric cook stoves being installed. You already are dealing with the challenges of integrating electric vehicles in buildings. So many EV policies are focusing on improving the charging infrastructure availability in residential buildings and townships. So how do these technologies and these sectors couple with these increasingly fast-paced decarbonizing electricity system would be my second point. The third would be with respect to and sort of linked to this is the proliferation of high-end appliances that we're going to be seeing, and we are already seeing so many of them are smart appliances, are digitally controlled, smart sensor enabled. Again, a very small segment of the population has access to them, but they are also responsible. I mean, given the if you look at the amount of electricity which is consumed in residential buildings in any typical city, of course, the majority comes from these high-end consumers. So we are looking at a phase where we would be integrating these different appliances, may or may not have standards, and that's also going to cause future disruptions in the energy system and how it works with them. And I think the last point will be actually sort of linked to this is also the fact that and we spoke about climate hazards, right? We are still very behind in understanding the energy needs of the urban poor, for example. I mean, of course, reliability and affordability are considered the two most pressing challenges when it comes to electricity needs in any city. But there are other energy needs of the most vulnerable section of the society, which we have very little understanding of, and they are also disproportionately impacted by all these interventions and all the disruptions that are going to happen. So whether it's electric cooking or electric vehicles, they may not be able to even access these benefits from these. So how do we bring into the mindset of policymakers the how do we make it equitable, how do we make it inclusive? That requires another training of policymakers. So that's another thing. And the last point that I want to drive across is the fact that, and we notice this in our research also, that states have been playing a very marginal role so far, and very few states. We have Maharashtra on the panel, so I'm not going to say that Maharashtra is the only example that actually we saw, where we have also observed that some level of financial autonomy is seen in the cities also in Maharashtra. But at the same time, they are sort of doing whatever the national government is asking the states or the cities to do. So there is no direct vision or targets or any kind of planning happening at the state level, and states are closest to the cities. States know the cities. States completely understand this city has these weaknesses, this city has these strengths, maybe I should use them. So states need to also change their mindset and really think about the long term, given that many of them are adopting carbon neutrality targets themselves. So yeah, I'll stop here. Thanks.
Sure. Thank you, Sumedha. And you have been a very patient audience, so thank you for that. So time for you to ask questions. Request if you could identify yourself, and if it's a question for a specific panelist, please let us know. So,
Thank you very much. I am A.K. Jain. I am an urban planner. I have just one or two comments to make. One is that when we are talking about energy efficiency or zero carbon efficiency, etc., one thing we have to emphasize, which translates into actual practice, is the legal framework. And legal framework in India is building bylaws, then ECBC, then of course development control regulations, and these already provide for something like district cooling, passive measures for say climate resilient buildings, compulsory solar cooking, boilers, etc. How these can be energized by renewables, and all these interventions. So we have to translate all these things into a legal framework. That is, I think, a very basic thing, and it means that we can learn the success of maybe Surat or Indore, but unless we are not able to translate these, we will still have all this kind of ad hocism which is happening in Delhi and many other major cities. And another thing which I think needs to be emphasized or underlined more clearly is that the Indian economy is going to become 35 billion by 2047. That means growth of 7 to 8 times. And accordingly, the energy demand will also grow by 7 to 8 times. This is, it means that there is no option but to explore new energy sources, maybe green hydrogen, maybe something more than green hydrogen, ocean energy, etc. So this needs also to be considered besides the renewables, etc. And if we are aspiring to achieve net zero by 2070, we cannot function or we cannot translate this into the unless we have local area plans. The policies, etc., are all right at the city level or at the national level, but the, local level plans are very important. And then another issue which we have to focus upon is the difference in the per capita energy consumption. Sumedha showed one of the chart that Delhi is having more than 5,000 megawatts per capita per year, and some cities are having only 1,000 or 1,500 megawatts. So how we can achieve these equity issues within the cities and also within the communities and various income groups? The people with car, with the air conditioner are using maybe 10 times the energy of people without cars and energy. So these things needs to be given more emphasis. Of course, they have been touched upon, they have been mentioned in the report, but given a more focus. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kumaresh from CEW, Council on Energy, Environment and Water. Uh, First off, thanks for the excellent insights from the study you have and also the panel discussion. You touched upon Delhi with the example of the three discoms playing an important role in rooftop solar. So I want to understand, if is it just a one-off case there, because maybe Delhi is more of a city, sort of a city state kind of thing, whereas say if you look at just as an example, since Maharashtra is also here, and I used to live in Mumbai for a long time. So MSEDCL, for instance, are there avenues where they can work with cities? Because these are typically state distribution licensees. So again, if there is a connection with the state government working with the cities, then this is possible, I guess. So what has been your experience, studying the cities you studied, if there is a practice already that's going on?
Thanks. Yes, so what we have observed is that with the Delhi, I mean, is a unique example, of course. It's a city state, as we know. So the fact that these discoms are also private is also quite unique to Delhi. Very few discoms in India are privatized. So from that perspective, of course, given their motivations to increase the share of renewable energy in the grid, and that also sort of matches with the vision of the Delhi government, which has a target in the Delhi solar policy. So it's sort of working towards that target. But when it comes to examples from other cities, what we have learned is that there is certain reluctance in the local municipalities or the local bodies to engage and interact with the discom. They consider them as just the suppliers of electricity, and somebody they talk to or coordinate with only when it's absolutely needed. So we have worked in, for example, in Kochi, for example, and we have seen the fact that the local discom there is a part of the discussions. The municipal corporation engages with the local discom very effectively, but we don't see the outcomes of the discussions really translating on the ground. So we don't see a lot of rooftop solar or other forms of renewable energy being installed in public buildings. So definitely not all cities and their governments are talking to the local discoms. In Indore also we noticed that the MPPKP KVCL could actually be a very strong driver of rooftop solar in Madhya Pradesh, because the net metering policies in MP are quite favorable. But despite that, there is not a lot of penetration of rooftop solar in even Indore Corporation's public buildings. So there is a lot of potential which remains untapped. Not to say that it's not happening, but definitely the coordination is missing between local bodies and the discoms. Yeah.
No, I think I agree with what Sumedha just pointed out. There's tremendous potential in solarization, and in view of the transition which is happening, the state of Maharashtra announced its solar policy in 2022. So it encourages solarization, and the discom that we have for power generation, the Mahagenco, has recently floated a public company to encourage this solarization transition towards solar. And MEDA, the Maharashtra Energy Development Agency, is promoting use of LEDs and use of solar panels, solar PVs, so as to make this transition happen quicker. And the plan that we have recently formulated, the State Climate Action Plan, talks about decentralized uh, solar equipments, especially for adaptation in the field of agriculture, like having solar AG pumps, for example, in order to have a decentralized model of solarization, so that that becomes more participatory, more inclusive, and fairly democratic.
See, we have this policy and legal mandate. As far as a local body or a city official is concerned, this legal mandate is very important, which is enforceable. See, policy, if it is an optional thing, it's advisable in nature. See, what we are talking about solar or this climate change, which is still in the discretionary domain of the government or in an advisory nature. So it cannot be a mandate on the part of the local body or the city or the government to enforce the same. See, coming to municipal laws, we have a legacy in 1960 and 61, that's Corporation Act and the Municipal Act in Kerala. After that, we have in 94 of the 73rd and 74th Amendment, we have Municipal Corporation Act, Municipal Act in 94. Even a single chapter is not there still on energy and on climate change. These are the new subjects. But energy, which we have in the government sector, in Kerala, still this energy is in the government sector. In other states, maybe in private sector also. These are transition, generation, or distribution. Everything is on non-company that is managed by the government. So that is not the mandate or the subject matter of the city governments or the local body. So coming to solar, this we have state government, we have policy. This is only a policy that is advisory in nature, but we are providing a kind of subsidy to the households who are coming for this solar energy. Maybe some one panel or two panel, that's we are giving as a subsidy, and 50% subsidy is going to the BPL family. Other it is 10 to 20% is given to the other APL families. So these are things which is happening in my city. One thing. Second thing is, I think the government has selected 100 cities as the solar city, and Trivandrum is one of the solar city from Kerala, and they are pushing. The government of India is pushing number of reforms, and in Trivandrum, the city corporation is steering this solar city, and as part of this, we have selected so many buildings, and we have selected 600 government buildings as pushing the same from smart city perspective, and we have already given the tenders, and almost 90% has been already commissioned. So this is happening. So my request is this climate change and environmental management and should be a mandate or a subject of local governments. Then only it can be steered by the local body. Otherwise, it will be in the policy framework. This is optional. There is a reference that the city government of Mumbai, they have some declaration by 2050 the city of Mumbai will be carbon neutral. This is a policy matter. So if a machinery, if a ruler is there that this is my wish, this is my mandate of, but the next mayor or next council may have some other priority, it will be in the backdrop. So if it is a legally binding, then it will be steered to, it will be get the desired result in the within the time stipulated by the original mission documents. So this should be my suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any further questions?
Question is regarding that we are sourcing so much of we are sourcing so much of equipment, for example, from the standpoint of renewables, for example, from solar, hydrogen, wind, etc., from outside, from China, etc., Vietnam, etc. And these countries are basically making the most out of it. But our local manufacturing, etc., is not to that level, as the gentleman just recently said that by 2047 we will be needing by the factor of 5 or 7 times more, I mean, energy for that matter. So our import dependence will be quite a lot on some of these geographies, etc. So what can we do to basically to indigenize all that? And basically my other point is that most of these small sector and the medium, even the small households, etc., consider I mean these renewables as too much expensive, simply because of the storage, chargers, automation, etc., is basically out of their reach, and most of them are not able to handle it also, because even if you find in with the smartphones, not many people are able to I mean access their applications. So same will be the case with these I mean technologies also. So how can we make them much more literate, etc., so that they are able to find the benefits? Because large institutions, etc., are always going to be much more aligned with that, because they have got the lot of resources as far as accessibility with the finance, government policy, etc. But how do you make them accessible for the small
Understood.
scale and the small players?
Understood.
Thanks very
So
much.
maybe that's something Santosh, you, me, and Ashim could take. Maybe a question from you.
Thank you, Deepak. Atika Wadhwa from iForest. 2 decades back, we were talking about lack of financial independence at the city level, urban local bodies. We've experimented with municipal bonds. We've experimented with pool financing, municipal credit rating. We've also talked about, user fee for water and sewage at some point, and now green bonds. And today again, we are talking about lack of financial independence at the local level. Just want to understand: have we made progress on that front, and how are we looking at things differently now? Because as rightly said, the action is at the city level. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, Mr. Santosh, would you want to?
Absolutely. So I'm no expert on solar, but I can throw some light on what I know of it. Government is doing quite a lot in terms of encouraging manufacturing of the solar panels in India. The one biggest initiative that central government has taken is the production linked incentive scheme, which you probably are aware of. Unlike the previous schemes, which basically just encouraged, I don't know, maybe just assembling of PV panels, right? But in the revised scheme, it's basically relating to the entire cycle of solar PV manufacturing, right from the wafers. Now, the challenge is beyond the government and the private industry itself. I think it's just that the technology just is available with 90% of it is actually available with just one country, and it's going to take some time. And you all see the geopolitical alignments that are happening to bring this technology out, and there is technology available in bits and pieces. So I think large companies are now mobilizing to see how we can get these technologies to India. So I would say it's a problem that is very, very, very well dealt with both by the private as well as by the government industry. Time should basically address the concern, but it is clearly writing on the wall that these things will be manufactured locally going forward.
Yeah. So I would, address the first part of the questions in terms of the investment mechanisms. What we have seen a trend that's happening currently, more states are factoring the aspects of, the supply domestic sources. So, for example, the states of Rajasthan, in their investment plan, they've already incorporated, solar and wind manufacturing incentives within these particular plans, and where domestic investors also were given some amount of exemptions on stamp duties, on some inter-subvention from the bank. So this kind of policy measures are very important to support the local domestic production that's happening at the state level. So this is a trend which we have observed recently, that states are giving more incentive more than the central financial assistance in terms of PLIs are concerned. Another important aspects is basically on the aspects of how cities, say for example, what we are talking about, the cities part of it has the autonomy to mobilize more resources. If you see the municipal act, varying few states, Maharashtra is one of the exceptions, Gujarat is another. Varying few states, even the municipal act doesn't permit the city authorities to mobilize additional resources in case they have to
mobilize new alternative source of investments, they have to take permission from the state authorities. So that's just something which curtails the autonomy of the cities to mobilize more innovative kind of financing that's need to happen. But yes, transition has already started happening at cities level, where cities have realized, post a GST, mechanism has also subsumed a certain portion of the revenues of the cities. Now cities are primarily dependent on the transfers that's happening from the central and the state governments. So in order to mobilize more innovative financing to happen, cities should be given first more autonomy to decide where they want to mobilize funding. Ask, are they using their own mechanism like a green bonds, which Indore and other cities are like Ghaziabad, the municipal bonds mechanism that Ghaziabad has used. So are they going to mobilize it through those mechanisms, or they want to depend on the state machineries? Say, for example, there are also within the, if you see the SEBI Regulations Act, the cities can mobilize a lot of money through their own climate funds, which a couple of states like Tamil Nadu has already declared. So these are something within the alternate investment vehicle. There is a room to mobilize additional funding from the capital markets. These things are already started happening in. So one thing is very clear: we will not have one single instruments for cities to mobilize funding. There will be alternative mechanism. There will be green bond, there will be municipal bonds, there will also be the state climate funds mechanisms, which will provide more fundings. There will be some carbon offset mechanism. Carbon offset will also be not a predominant, but of course a secondary source of revenue streams for the cities to happen, as well as there will be more number of concessional funds coming in from the multilateral development organizations. World Bank is one of the examples. KfW is another example where they have been working with large number of city authorities for various multiple projects. Tamil Nadu KfW joint ventures, which is also one of the example where they have been using the multilateral development banks for concessional funding to their financial institutions, which has been used by the cities for various urban development programs. So we will see more innovative mechanisms to come in, and this will be supported by both the state and the central governments to come in, giving them more rooms and mechanisms for them to participate. But definitely there has to be some mechanisms in terms of acts and autonomies are concerned. The state needs to give more flexibility for the cities to mobilize more resources and innovate in terms of mobilizing these additional resources. Thanks.
Thank you, Ashim. Being here with us today, and thanks to my fellow panelists and the audience for a great session. Hopefully, with all these interventions coming in, soon we'll go from singing "We built this city on rock and roll" to "We built this city with clean energy." Thank you.